Okay, we are here. I'm Eric Soriano. This is JoAnn Soriano, or also known as JoAnn England. We're here doing her memoir. We're here at JC Nichols Memorial Park in Kansas City, Missouri. Beautiful Sunday afternoon. It's October the 19th, 2014. And we're going to talk in this segment about the jobs, some of the work that my mom did throughout her life. And we've been sharing different stories back and forth. And if I were to, I'll start off, but it looks like the first job was working with my dad, Charlie Soriano, at Artistry and Wrought Iron in Fort Sill, just outside of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where they had a retail shop. They sold wrought iron tables and chairs and whatever else. So I'll let you. So you did retail.
Right. So I did retail.
Kept the shop.
Right.
I
was there during the day while Dad was at work, and had a partner, Marty Grisler, and he was in the Army. But then we packed that all up when he was, when he left the Army.
So he left the Army. He closed the Artistry and Wrought Iron.
Yes, and we went to Kansas City for a year in 1954.
Kansas City, Missouri.
We lived in Kansas City, Missouri in the Van Bunch Apartments.
For a year.
Yeah. And one day in the summer, it was 115 for 6 days in a row.
Oh.
Before air conditioning. And that's when Dad said, we are never coming back again.
Okay, so it was multiple days of 115-degree temperatures that convinced Dad not to live here.
Yeah, he had an engineering job at American Safety Company.
American Safety. So he had an engineering job here in Kansas City, Missouri, and American Safety.
Right, and I had a secretarial job.
You had a secretarial job.
I worked for Celotex.
Celotex. You had another job. And was that here in Kansas City?
Kansas City, Missouri, yeah.
Now, at some point you worked for Commercial National Bank.
That was right out of high school, yeah.
Okay, so going back in time.
Until I got married.
You graduated in 1950 out of high school.
And I worked there for over a year, and then when I got married, I went down, I went with Dad, and down in Fort Smith, Arkansas, I worked at a 5 and 10 cent store to save enough money to buy new uniforms for Dad going to, he was going to Fort Sill to go to Officers Candidate School.
So it was a 5 and dime store?
Yeah, like a Woolworths. It was a Woolworths.
5 and dime in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Another job you had. So you must have been, how old were you then, 20? 19, 20?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would have been, you were born in 32, so 20 would have been 52. You worked at a 5 and dime store at Fort Smith, Arkansas. And then
when in Kansas City, we talked about working for Celotex, right?
You worked at Celotex in Kansas City, Missouri.
As a secretary. And we were saving money that year, and then we went back to Raleigh, and I got a job at Fort Leonard Wood in civil service. I was a GS3, I think.
So you were a GS3 civil servant at Fort Leonard Wood,
and
Missouri.
I worked in the post telephone company. There were two of us running the little telephone company for the people who lived on base, and they'd come in and pay their telephone bills, and we kept the books, put the money in, and it was in the signal office, and that's where they had all the switchboards. So what year was that? That was
53.
So they still had switchboards, and half of the women on the switchboard they would be waxed, and the rest were farm women that lived around there.
And they were doing the switchboard.
Yeah.
But you worked in the signal office, and you did more administrative type stuff?
Well, we just ran the little telephone.
You ran the telephone?
Me and one other woman. But then I got pregnant, and I left in January of 1956, and then Alex was born in June. No, wait a minute. He was born in April.
April 1st. Or second?
April 2nd,
56.
1956.
All right, so then you stopped working at the signal office at Fort Leonard Wood.
In those days, people didn't work all the way through their pregnancy.
Right. So you got pregnant, and then you were still, so you had Alex while you were
Still in Rolla.
at Rolla.
That's where he was born.
You remember where he was born in Rolla?
I don't remember the name of the hospital.
It was a hospital, not a nursing home.
No.
Okay. All right, so then you moved from Rolla to
Connecticut.
Dad,
So for many years I didn't work. Well, all I did was do the secretarial and engineering assistance for Dad.
so when he went to work for Sikorsky, did you stay home?
Oh, I stayed home, yeah.
And you had a couple of little kids. You had me, 58, and
And I didn't drive at that time. And whenever I'd run out of, I would bake bread, and you would say, "Ran out of bread, huh, Mom? You had to bake your own." Because I couldn't run to the store.
we always had fresh bread, it seemed like.
Right.
Okay. And I was a little wisecracker and said, "Run out of bread, huh, Mom?" Okay. I never had store-bought bread that I can remember as a kid. It was a different experience than store-bought bread. And then store-bought cookies too. We had always had fresh cookies.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so then Dad worked his way through several companies, Sikorsky Helicopter, American Machine and Foundry. And when they moved, he didn't want to move with them.
Right. He worked. He tested their atomic reactors. They were fake. I don't know. He ran a test for them.
He tested atomic reactors for American Machine and Foundry
In Greenwich, Connecticut.
in Greenwich. That's a good little piece up the highway every day to drive every day. Yeah. All right, okay, so when the company said you need to move to Pennsylvania, he said no, I'm going to stay here. He started Soriano Engineering Associates
In the
in
basement.
the basement of our house where we grew up, where I grew up, and he had you work doing filing and correspondence, and it sounds like general office work.
And we did actually prosecute one patent, which is really hard for people. People can legally prosecute their own patents.
You prosecuted a patent
And we got it through.
and got it
It's really
through.
tough, yeah.
So you've worked in helping to do the research and all the paperwork to get a patent through. Remember which patent it was?
On the double-coated tape dispenser.
A double-coated tape dispenser. So Mom here helped negotiate the government patent office to get a patent on the double-coated tape dispenser to split the tape from the liner as you pulled it through. I remember working on those as a kid.
Do you?
Oh yeah, I remember all the little parts and pieces that went together to make that. I remember, but let's talk about you. That's what we're here for. So then Dad started artistry and wrought iron, and during that went on for several years, but
He rented a building in Bridgeport,
so he rented a building in Bridgeport. We got the one down on
Atlantic Street,
Atlantic Street.
down by the Long Island Sound.
I remember going down to help clean that place up when he first rented it. It was horrible inside. It was really rough. We had to fix the roof. So you worked in sales for artistry and wrought iron and delivery.
And I made all the hooks and the chains. Well, I dipped all the chains in paint, and I painted the top racks wrought iron black, flat black,
okay,
with a brush.
so you worked in sales, production, and delivery at artistry and wrought iron.
Right.
You wear a lot of hats, I take it, when you
Yeah.
own a small business like that. And
Yeah.
there's only the two people working, right? You and Dad that ran the business pretty much.
Right.
Okay, and so you said while you're out selling pot racks to the kitchen supply stores, someone offered you or mentioned a job at Thermador Microwave
In Boston.
in Boston. So you had to, they were out of Boston?
The microwaves were brand new then.
microwaves were brand new.
and cost $3,000.
Now, was that a residential model or was that a commercial model? $3,000.
No, that's residential.
Residential, $3,000 for a microwave. And Mom went out and started demonstrating by cooking in microwaves to show people how to use them as an instructor. So that must have been pretty. How long did that go on? Do you remember?
And and that's when the Cuisinart food processor came into being in this country. And I would have demonstrations at department stores showing people how to use the food processor. And people were scared of the food processor because of that sharp blade.
Yes.
And then I started doing food. That's how I got started teaching cooking. I would have cooking classes featuring the food processor.
So you got started cooking, teaching cooking by demonstrating the Roku, I guess it was, food processor, and teaching people. I remember you were really big on grinding stuff up. We had the blender, which you could puree stuff, but that food processor, if I remember right, you could actually almost like mill grains and things.
Well, you could grate. I make the easiest thing to do is make potato pancakes.
Potato pancakes.
You grate them, and then you take that blade out, put another one in, and mix them, and then you got potato pancake mix.
So that's interesting. So the food processor, which I think we all remember as kids, having those around, and led to the cooking school. And then you said you cooked at the Connecticut Culinary School in New Haven.
And I'd ride the train to go up there.
So you were a paid instructor to come up to New Haven and teach at a cooking school, a culinary school. And you also taught cooking in Fairfield, right? I
rented the kitchen, so it was my own cooking school.
It was your own so you owned the cooking school.
Right. And at the same time, I wrote a cooking column for the Fairfield Citizen.
I remember you wrote a cooking column. You remember what the cooking column was called?
To Please the Palate.
To Please the Palate by JoAnn Soriano. That was her part of the Fairfield. What was the Fairfield paper called?
Fairfield Citizen.
The Fairfield Citizen paper. Mom wrote a column for that paper. So Mom's been a writer. I'll go down the list here in a little while. She's been a retailer. She's been a shopkeeper. She's been an office manager so far. She's done filing and correspondence.
I learned to be a draftsman. Dad taught me how to be a draftsman.
She learned to be a draftsman, and she worked for Sikorsky Helicopter as a draftsman. They offered her a full-time gig, and she did drafting for Extrusion Technology Company.
I was the only draftsman, and they extruded titanium parts for the stealth bomber.
Stealth bomber parts.
That's all they did.
So you worked for a defense contractor. It's really interesting, all these different jobs you've had, and some of them fairly entrepreneurial, like selling for artistry and wrought iron, would teach you to be a salesperson. You understood the cost and the bottom line, because it was you're a small business, and you were very close to that small business. And talk about, so we didn't talk about the Trader Joe.
After the drafting, and then all the drafting went off the board onto the computer, and I did AutoCAD drafting for 2 years, and then Grandma came to live with us, and I took care of her, and then I went to Trader Joe's for 15 years.
Wow! So you learned AutoCAD, and what age did you learn AutoCAD? I work with people that do AutoCAD. I remember.
I went to school and learned it, and then I worked at it. You see, it was such a change from working in a big room with people on drafting boards. Then one weekend at one company I worked with, they said, on Monday morning there will be no more drafting boards. Everybody will be in a cubicle on a computer. And a lot of people quit.
That was a big shock for a lot of people. Yeah, I can imagine having to go totally electronic. This was back 30, 40 years ago when the CAD wasn't very fast.
Right.
The regen was very slow on those CAD. It wasn't the CAD program, it was the processor, well, it was everything. But so you've been you've been a drafting jobber for Sikorsky. You've been a employee draftsperson for Extrusion Technology, extruding titanium parts for the B-2 bomber. And then you went to work for Trader Joe's. Now, so 15 years at Trader Joe's, that's a big deal.
In charge of demos. I never worked on the factory.
In charge of demos or demonstrations. So you were, you took the Trader Joe food that they had and you cooked it into something that was...
Yeah, and in those days we could actually hand out, I'd write a recipe, sort of make up a recipe and give the customers the recipe. They don't do that anymore. Now it's a simpler form of demo, but we would actually make real recipes. Where people had to use, they had to really work at that.
Did you develop the recipes from scratch?
Yeah.
You would grab something off the shelf at Trader Joe's and say, all right, I'm going to create a meal out of this, and then serve samples of it to people, and then tell them, that was pretty intense.
It was.
That's sales. See, that's food demonstrating that you're selling people on using the Trader Joe's product. But you had been in sales before, selling hot racks to restaurant supply stores before, so...
It was a really pleasant job because you're just cooking and say, hey, see what I made?
Yeah, try it. Try what I've made. Oh, you want to know how to make it? Here's the ingredients right here at Trader Joe's. Have you had any jobs since Trader Joe's?
No, I worked until May of 2013 is when I stopped working at Trader Joe's.
You worked at Trader Joe's till May of 2013, then you moved to California.
Right.
Okay, so that's a good reason for that still being there. I mean, I'll give you that. 15 years, okay. And joking. So you, how about any jobs during high school, paper routes, anything like that?
Not, no.
Never had a paper route, never shoveled snow?
No, you kids, no.
No, it wasn't, okay. Just checking because we kind of had a discussion between all those kids recently about what we did.
You all had a lot of jobs.
We had a lot of jobs.
I had forgotten about.
All right, and so what was your favorite job of all time?
I guess at Trader Joe's, it's a people job, it's retail, it's, it's just a fun job.
Trader Joe's, your favorite job?
I thought I would work there a few months, but I never quit.
You thought you'd work a few months, you worked 15 years.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. And you started when you were 68, 70?
Yeah.
Right.
And Trader Joe's had just come to Fairfield, and Dad saw the ad in the local paper advertising for a demonstrator, so I started there before they opened. And I helped set up the shelves and everything.
Amazing.
But I never had to learn. My first captain or first manager said, don't let anybody teach you how to be a cashier because then they'll always be calling you over, and I never did cashier work.
Always a food demonstrator, excuse me. And
or I'd do tastings for the employees, when the new products would come in. I'd say, hey guys, you want to taste our new product? I did that. But there's a new philosophy at Trader Joe's. They just want to sell you a meal in a bag lately. So it's a simpler job to do.
So, are you still an advocate for Trader Joe's?
I am.
You've got several out there within a short distance from your...
So I can get to my closest one in 2 minutes.
And now you're living at Leisure World in Seal Beach, California.
Yeah.
You were telling me that there's no curbs, no steps anywhere. I might have went over this in an earlier video, but Leisure World is they call a cooperative where everyone owns a part. There's 9,000 people living in an area 1 mile by 1 mile square.
Yeah.
And you're very close to Lori and Chris, two of your children.
I went out there to be a burden to them.
You went out there to be a burden to them. But you take care of yourself, you have your own place.
Yeah.
You still drive?
Yes.
And what are you driving now? What kind of car are you driving?
2012 Hyundai Accent.
Hyundai 2012 Hyundai Accent, and California. I guess there's a real busy highway near you there.
Oh, freeways everywhere. It's the busiest freeway center in the country, right by where I live.
Wow.
But I drive on the Pacific Coast Highway if I go up to Lori's.
So
I avoid the freeways. I mean, I have plenty of time now, so I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere.
plenty of time. So kind of stress-free living out there in Seal Beach, huh?
Right.
They take care of everything for you.
Now I don't have to take medication for blood pressure, high blood pressure.
That is amazing.
Now my blood pressure is normal without medication.
Your blood pressure is normal. You attribute that to the lack of stress?
Yeah.
How nice is that? That's a great thing. You have beautiful surroundings there, gorgeous, landscape, the ocean, the cool ocean, what do they call it? The marine layer moves in at night. And what's the average temperature at night?
Usually in the 60s, and then during the day it's in the 70s, year-round.
So you have this very small swing in temperatures, 70s to 60s. That sounds like a beautiful place.
And Seal Beach is called Mayberry by the Sea.
Mayberry
it's
by
like
the sea.
Just a little town on the coast.
And you came here to Kansas City in October because
The weather is beautiful.
the trees are changing colors. It's almost like the weather that you left back home,
Yeah.
but you get to have it here in Kansas City. So that's pretty nice. We're happy to have you here. Tonight we're going to go over to Andy's again for pizza night. Something that we did as kids. We had pizza every Sunday night.
Right.
I talked about it earlier, but it's good to reminisce a little bit. Had a great upbringing in Connecticut, and I think with that we'll wrap up video number 6 in the JoAnn Soriano, JoAnn England Memoir. And have to get on the road here. Get over to Lenexa to the pizza dinner at Andy's house.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.